Hi, and welcome everybody. Welcome to the Protecting Our Planet with Science session. Thank you very much for joining staying and joining in the sessions.
In this one, we'll be talking about the amazing difference that science can make to protecting our planet. And we've got an incredible group of panelists who I'll introduce you to, who are here to share their career stories and how they're protecting through science. So first up, we've got Ariana. And Ariana is a PhD researcher in chemical oceanography at Imperial College London. She's interested in understanding how human activities affect and pollute the marine environment and translating scientific research into world solutions. And next up, we have Ellie, who is an education officer for the Royal Meteorological Society. Her work supports the teaching of weather and climate through the curriculum in schools and aims for all students to depart with the basic climate understanding needed. Helen is the Conservation Programme Manager for the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland. She works as part of a team trying to save threatened species in Scotland and internationally through reintroduction programmes and improving native biodiversity. And lastly, I'm Rosalie, and I'll be chairing our session today. I'm a marine scientist interested in nature recovery, and I work for Blue Marine Foundation on the UK's first multi-habitat marine restoration project. So I'm going to give you a brief introduction to my career and what I've done so far. So one of the reasons I got into science as a career is I have a really strong memory of visiting an aquarium in somewhere called Monterey Bay. And I remember being blown away by all of the different marine life and how much information there was, from underwater kelp forests to rocky shore systems and deep oceans. I thought it was absolutely amazing. And I became obsessed with oceans and wildlife. And as a result, I thought I'd quite like to study biology at university. So I took some A levels that I thought would help me get to that degree. And those were biology, chemistry, maths, and English lit because I really enjoyed it at the time. And I ended up studying biology at Oxford. I was a bit nervous to go there. I wanted to have the time to enjoy hobbies and try new things whilst at uni. And it all felt very new. But when I got there, it was amazing. I spent loads of time in lectures in the Natural History Museum at Oxford, which was incredible, learning about things from genetics to animal behavior and nature conservation and evolution. And I loved our practicals and labs, and you can see a bit of a silly photo here from one of them, and still have plenty of time for hobbies. I've really enjoyed taking on committee roles at societies and also running college sports teams just to have a bit of fun as well. And one of the things that really helped me in my career that I did whilst I was at university was trying to find any internship opportunity I could. And that involved asking for advice from my lecturers. And I ended up, for one of them, going to Royal Holloway, which is a university near London, to do 8 weeks monitoring bee intelligence in a lab, which was really interesting, nothing that I thought I'd ever end up doing. And I ended up learning a lot from the rest of the team that worked there. And otherwise, I volunteered on different projects at the university during term. So back in Oxford, helping with things like local wildlife monitoring and also planning research expeditions for the summers. And in my last year of uni, I did a dissertation with a professor who I liked, and I really liked her research. And I was lucky enough to get offered a research assistant job at that lab. And this was at the Seascape Ecology Lab, where I was for 3 years in the end, helping research things from how drones can map coral reefs to understanding how seagrass helps us store carbon. And I was lucky enough to get to go on some fun fieldwork trips whilst I was there as well. And another part of the role was that I led outreach and engagement for the lab and things like art science collaboration projects, which you can see some results of here. And for me, science communication was a really important part of the research that I was doing. And combining the two, so art and science, helped us reach new audiences. And it was a really interesting way to share our research. During that role, I also had a part time job at the United Nations Global Compact UK, which gave me insight into more businessy kind of roles. And we worked with companies to help them become more sustainable. And it was really different to the research work, but it gave me a really good insight into different types of careers in sustainability. And I then joined Blue Marine Foundation, which is where I am now. as I was interested in applying the science that I'd learned and been researching to jobs on the ground. And it's been a busy but really incredible place to work. So how am I protecting our planet with science now? So my role at Blue Marine Foundation is coordinating the Solent Seascape Project. And this is the UK's first multi-habitat coastal restoration project. So we're working to restore things like seagrass meadows, salt marshes, native oyster reefs, and also seabird nesting sites across the south of England, specifically the area called the Solent, which is home to cities like Portsmouth, also the Isle of Wight and Southampton. And these habitats, some of which you can see on the screen, provide amazing benefits to people, such as oysters, which filter the water to improve how clean it is, seagrasses and salt marshes, which help to lock away carbon dioxide and help our planet. And they can do this at incredible rates, sometimes faster than those on land. And they're also home to really important species like thresher sharks, seahorses, and endangered eels. And we use science to inform all of the restoration work that we do, making sure that everything we do is good for both people and nature. And the project also works with local communities and people who work in all kinds of jobs to collaborate and help our planet. And working together is really important to the Solent project. And as you can see here, we wouldn't be able to deliver our project without volunteers helping us do all of these science-based activities. So things like harvesting seagrass seed, conducting monitoring or biosecurity. And it's a really exciting project to work on. And finally, this poster shows our main aims and how we're working to protect our local environment in the Solent. And science is one very important part of this project, and the research that the team are doing will provide a database to show why nature restoration is important and what benefits it can provide to us. And you can find a little bit more about the project by looking at our website, which should be linked in the chat. And we've got some great short films on nature restoration if you want to find out what that looks like somewhere like the UK. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm going to stop sharing my slides and hand over to Ariana to do her introduction too.
Can you see my slide well?
Yeah, they look great.
Perfect. So, hi everyone. For today, I thought I'd go through the path that brought me to work as a researcher in chemical oceanography at Imperial College, and to start from the very beginning. So, I was born and grew up in Milan in northern Italy, as you can see in the map. And despite being a big city, Milan is in a fantastic position as a nature gateway. In fact, it is 1.5 hours by car, both from the Mediterranean Sea and the Alps. And this, together with the fact that my parents undoubtedly instilled me in a great sense of love and respect for nature and the outdoors since I was very young, contributed to shaping me in the person that I have become. The school system in Italy is quite different compared to here, and students are required to pick their area of specialization when they start high school at 14 and to stick to it for the next 5 years. So when it was my time, I decided to go for the scientific curriculum, which included math, physics, and a lot of other natural sciences, as you can see on the slide, but also many language and classical subjects like Latin, history, and philosophy. And by the end of high school, the long-standing fascination I had for the solar system and my childhood dream to become an astronaut had changed into a very deep realization that what I cared the most about was our own planet, Earth. So I went on to study geology in Milan, but unfortunately, not long after I started, I realized that I did not like rocks that much, although I really enjoyed the many field trips we did as part of the course. And at the same time, I also learned that geosciences are not only about rocks and not only about the deep past, but rather span a very wide variety of topics. And my breakthrough moment arrived when I went to the Maldives for a marine ecology workshop, because the university had a research outpost there. And in those 10 brief days, I realized that the ocean was the most important and fascinating component of the Earth system for me, and that I wanted to dedicate my career to studying and protecting it. So I then moved to Utrecht in the Netherlands to pursue a master in marine sciences, and that was by far the best decision I could take at the time. The master lasted 2 years, with the first year dedicated to studying marine chemistry, physics, biology, and geology, and the second year dedicated to research. And in my second year, I decided to focus on the issue of marine plastic pollution. And I moved to Hobart in Tasmania to work at CSIRO, which is the National Research Agency of Australia. And while I was there, I researched the spatial distribution of plastic items on the coastlines of Australia and discovered that the size and the occurrence of these items increased as one goes from the waterline to the backshore vegetation, because most items get trapped in the vegetation and then are unable to move. While I was there, I also had a fantastic opportunity to go on a 3-week field trip along the coast of Queensland for over 2,000 kilometers, where we collected new data similar to the ones I was using for my research. And at some point, we even found a beach toothbrush that looked a lot like the one I was using at the time. And that definitely resonated a lot with my concerns for the impact of human activities on the environment. I finished my master in late 2019 and had in mind to go back to Tasmania for my PhD. However, as you will remember, COVID hit right then, and international moves were not an option anymore. So I spent the next 2 years working remotely, both as a researcher and then in the scientific publishing industry. And while this was very, very much unplanned, and I have to admit, quite frustrating at the time, in hindsight, these experiences contributed greatly to my personal and professional development. So at the time, I learned that even when things don't go according to plan, they might lead to even better things than what we expected in the first place. So in this case, they led me to the UK and to Imperial College, where I've spent the last 3 years pursuing my doctoral degree, which I will finish in the next couple of months. But what exactly am I doing, and how is this contributing to protecting our planet? My research at the moment focuses on lead pollution in the ocean caused by human activities on land. So most of the lead that we find in the environment is or has been emitted during industrial activities like coal combustion, metal smelting, or historically by the use of leaded gasoline for car engines. And my work combines both laboratory analysis of seawater samples and the use of machine learning techniques to expand the knowledge we can get from observations. The way it is done is by going at sea with highly specialized equipment that is able to retrieve seawater samples from even the deepest depths of the ocean and then analyzing it on land. My samples came in double bag plastic bottles that could only be opened in our ultra clean laboratory here at Imperial College. In fact, there is much more lead in the air in London than there is in seawater in the open ocean. So I had to be extremely cautious not to contaminate the samples that I was working with. And once processed, the samples are analyzed in a machine called a mass spectrometer, and the data is used to understand the distribution of pollution in the global ocean, both at the surface and at depth, and can be used to inform policymakers on how to reduce pollution in the future. And this is all I had for now, and I'm very happy to take questions later if there's any.
Thank you very much for sharing, Ariana. That was great. Now I'm going to hand over to Ellie, who's going to talk to us about her work at the Royal Meteorological Society. So Ellie, if you could please share your slides.
Brilliant. Hi everyone, it's really good to be with you here today. So to quickly introduce myself before I do anything more, I am a meteorologist. So a meteorologist is a scientist who studies the atmosphere, both in terms of the weather and the climate. So the weather is the short-term state of the atmosphere. It can change from hour to hour, day to day, whereas the climate is an average over a 30-year period. It's what we would expect, rather the weather is what we get. To become a meteorologist, I did an integrated master's in meteorology and climate. And since then, I've had varying roles in meteorology. I was a weather forecaster, I've been a project manager, and now I'm an education officer, but I'll go into these in a bit more detail in a minute. Essentially, I had an interest in weather and climate for a long time, and I have been able to pursue a career in that. And luckily and enjoyably for me, it is of great importance in today's society as we face a changing climate. So, as you can see in the photos on the right, all of which I've taken over my life, I've always been interested in looking up. I've wanted to understand what the weather is and why it happens, essentially. And it's a great way of just getting some really cool pictures. So there was two major events, what we would call extreme events, that caught my attention really when I was younger, and gave me this interest. The first was the Big Freeze in the winter of 2009 and 2010. Essentially, it was a cold snap, a period of cold weather for a prolonged time. And actually, it was an event that caused me to not go to school for a week and a half. So I got a week and a half of snow days. The second event was one that was very much based in the northeast, in Newcastle. It was called Thunder Thursday, um, and it was a large thunderstorm that the northeast experienced. Um, I what would normally be a half an hour to 45-minute journey home turned into a 2.5 hour journey home for me, due to the flooding. And the Tyne Bridge, which you can see in the picture, was actually struck multiple times by lightning. So yeah, it was really interesting to see how both of these two extreme events really impacted life, be it transport, be it sporting activities, be it health. I was also from a agricultural or a rural setting. That's where I grew up, and I was also very interested in how weather impacted the farmers that lived around me. So I've always been very aware of the relationship between weather and climate and us as humans and our way of life and nature. So at GCSE level, I already knew I had this interest in weather and climate and specific science. So my GCSEs I took were separate science, maths, and geography. I just love learning about the world, hence why I took geography. A levels, by this point, I knew it was meteorology that I wanted to go into at university, and I knew which courses were available, and the majority of them at the time required maths and physics, so I knew I needed to do them at A level. I also really enjoyed them, so that helped. And my final one was chemistry. Again, chemistry comes into weather and climate if you look at atmospheric composition of gases, and many other things that chemistry can impact. Then going on to university, so I chose to go to the University of Reading, and here I studied an integrated master's in meteorology and climate. So that means I did the 4 years instead of the 3-year course that you would normally do in an undergraduate course. My third year of this actually happened to be in the University of Oklahoma. Why the University of Oklahoma? Well, it is the National Weather Centre, or it's home to the National Weather Centre, and this is actually the place where tornado warnings are issued in the US. So a really cool place to go to with some really well-known professors in their area of meteorology and climate. Oklahoma is also in what we would call the Tornado Alley, and so an area that receives a large number of tornadoes over a particular time of year. And I did do a little bit of storm chasing whilst I was out there in my free time. So trying to find a thunderstorm that would produce a tornado. I was unfortunately unsuccessful in finding any tornadoes on my 3 storm chasing times, but either which way, it was very fun, and we did get to see some really big thunderstorms when we did go out. So since my education, I've had 3 careers so far. So the first one was marine weather forecasting at a private company called Fugro. Here, the main job was to provide forecasts for ships or vessels. The majority of them were working on setting up offshore wind farms. So that was a really cool thing to be part of. The next was crane forecasts. So wind increases with height. Cranes are tall, and therefore the windier it is, it's a problem for cranes. They need to know when it's safe to work and when it's not. And the third one was film forecasts. So if you don't finish a scene on a particular day where it's really sunny, you need to finish the scene the next day. However, if it's going to rain the next day, it's not going to work. You can't have half a scene with sunshine and half with rain. So they really needed forecasts. I then moved on to become a project manager at the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. I didn't want to leave the environmental sciences, and therefore I supported environmental projects, mainly in water quality and hydrological modelling. Hydrological modelling is the modelling of water, how it flows once it's hit the earth. and essentially looking at the water cycle as a whole. And now I currently work as an education officer at the Royal Meteorological Society. So we are the professional body for meteorology and climate science. And in this role, I support the teaching of weather and climate in formal education, so within the schools that you are all sat in now. The Society has a main aim, so we believe that every student to leave school should have the basic climate literacy that will enable them to engage with messages put forward by the media or politicians to make informed decisions about our own opportunities and responsibilities. So to support this aim, we support the teaching across all the curriculum, not just the STEM subjects. We support both students and teachers, and climate research is a continuous process. It's always getting updated with new facts and figures, and it's this that we want to ensure that you're seeing in schools, not old data. So how does my role contribute to protecting our planet? Well, the climate is mentioned more and more every day in response to extreme weather events such as hurricanes, droughts, and flooding. You may have heard about the flooding in Valencia over the last couple of weeks, and climate change has been mentioned amongst all that coverage. Most news websites, papers, and other sources have specific climate sections. So if you go onto the BBC site now, there is a climate section specific to all things climate and climate change. And you'll hear climate mentioned by many politicians at the moment. We need to understand both the weather and climate from our teaching in schools to understand the challenges that global warming and climate change pose to us and everyone across the globe. We need to understand this and able to understand the information that's communicated to us by the media and by the politicians and on those news websites that we mentioned earlier. From this, we then can make informed decisions about our opportunities and responsibilities to mitigate and adapt to climate change. So mitigation is the actions that we can take to reduce our emissions of greenhouse gases, whereas adaptation is adapting to the effects climate change is happening on us. We also need to be able to be ready for the jobs that happen in the future, the things that will help us move to our net zero goals. Lastly, I want to leave you with is that the Royal Met Society has a lot of careers guidance that's available for you if you'd like to get into weather and climate. So if you do go onto our MetLink careers page, there's a hub for everything that you would like to see on there. There's courses, both university courses, but also courses you can take in your own free time if you're interested in weather and climate. And we have careers booklets that highlight a number of different careers that you can have in climate and weather that aren't necessarily just weather forecasters or climate scientists. We've got people on there who are lawyers, who work for non-governmental organisations. We also have vehicle technicians who help reduce emissions from vehicles. So please do have a look at that. I'm going to hand back now, so thank you.
Thanks very much, Ellie. That was great. And now, finally, last but not least, can I hand over to Helen?
There you go.
Yes, great. Lovely. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Helen and I work for the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, we're the wildlife conservation charity that runs Edinburgh Zoo and Highland Wildlife Park, and we also have a conservation department, which is who I work for. In terms of how I came to be in this position, saving the planet by saving species, as with many of the other people here, I did my A-levels in science subjects, but I also did English literature. So I did biology, chemistry, and English literature because basically I was rubbish at maths and I didn't want to do it for A-level. And you can ask me later whether or not that was a good decision or not when it came to the rest of my career, but I have managed to make it through without a maths A-level, so it can be done. I went to university in Cambridge and did a degree in zoology, and that was all very standard and very lovely, and I wanted to be David Attenborough and learn all about the natural world. But when I got to the end of my degree, I realized that I really didn't know what I wanted to do next. And so I took a bit of a swerve to one side, and I ended up working in public relations in Manchester. And public relations is basically where you have clients and you want the media to talk positively about your clients. So my clients were anything from My Little Pony through to Hilton hotels and different food companies, technology companies. and I was trying to get the media to talk positively about them. And I did that for 5 years before realizing it really wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to get back into science and conservation. And so I took a break from my job. I was very lucky. The company I was working for at the time let me take a break. And I went to the Amazon in Peru as a volunteer. And I worked on a parrot and macaw research program. And the reason I did that was because I wanted to understand if I would enjoy field work, if it was something I could do. And I thought if I could do it in the Amazon, I could do it pretty much anywhere. And I absolutely loved it. So when I came back, I undertook a master's in conservation and zoo studies, because even back then I was very interested in the role that zoos could play in conservation. I then moved to New Zealand to do my PhD, which I did on little spotted kiwi and their genetics. So I learned a lot about the role of genetics in conservation. I ended up staying in New Zealand for 8 years, first as a PhD student and then as a research fellow. And I carried on working with birds and conservation genetics. And then I decided I wanted to leave academia for a more practical role. And I moved here to Scotland for the role that I am in now. So a bit of a weird career trajectory, perhaps, compared to many people working in conservation and science. What I have enjoyed about my career over the years is that it has given me the privilege to get up close and personal with lots and lots of different species. I have worked with birds, reptiles, mammals, and now more than ever, insects and other invertebrates. And I've been to some really cool places. And the thing that I always ask myself in terms of whether I'm happy or not in my job is, am I doing cool things in cool places? And if I am, then I can check that box for myself and know that I am happy in my career choice. Because having made a large change in my career, it's really important to me that I am happy in what I'm doing. In terms of my current role, I currently lead a team that is running conservation breeding for release programs for 4 of the most threatened invertebrates in the UK, many of which have their strongholds here in Scotland. So that's pine hoverfly, dark-bordered beauty moth, pond mud snail, and medicinal leech. So we run breeding programs for these animals, and we're also introducing them into new sites because a lot of them are reduced down to maybe just 1, 2, 3 sites. And obviously that's not enough. We need to get more of these animals in more places. They're all playing really important roles in the ecosystems that they live in. And so we need to look after these species to look after our ecosystems. We also have a rare species of bee on site at Highland Wildlife Park, the small scabious mining bee. And so we run survey and habitat restoration for that bee at our zoo site. And we recently initiated a program with blood red longhorn beetle, which again is critically endangered and reduced to just 1 site in the UK up in Scotland. And we're doing large scale citizen science surveys and breeding program for this species as well. When I first joined RZSS, I was working on the beaver reintroduction program. So this is a wee baby beaver being released out into the wild. And that was the first ever legal reintroduction of a mammal species to the UK. It was a successful project over in the west coast of Scotland in Knapdale. And I still remain involved in beaver conservation from an advocacy point of view. I also manage our relationship with our partners in Brazil who work on giant armadillos and giant anteaters. Don't worry, that armadillo is perfectly fine. It's just undergoing a tracker attachment procedure so that we can release it back out into the wild. And that's a lot about partnership working, which, to be honest, a lot of my role is to do with managing conservation partners, because it takes more than one organization to save a species, always. And just as it takes more than one organization, it takes more than one person. So it is not just me doing this work. I have a fantastic team of people that I work with. My manager, our head of conservation, Dr. Helen Sen, is down in the right corner there. I also have Carl and Adam and George, who work with me in Highland Wildlife Park, and Laura and Kasia, who work with me at Edinburgh Zoo. And I'm massively grateful to all of those people for enabling the work that we are able to do. And if you are interested in our work, then please just Google RZSS and you will find us online and find all of our social media channels. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Helen. That was really interesting. And we've got time for a few more questions before the session ends. So I'll start off with one for Ariana. So how have you found that studying different subjects and working across different fields has helped your career, or have you felt that it benefited your career, Ariana?
Yeah, definitely. I loved it. I'm sure that it helped me become a better scientist. But also, I would say it helped me broaden my views of what we can do with science. Science is the journey to discovery, and it's really hard to discover or learn something new if you're siloed and only look at it from one perspective. So I loved changing a bit my perspective through my studies, but I also still love collaborating with people from different fields to enhance our understanding of how the planet can be protected and how we can reduce the levels of pollution in the ocean, for instance.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think science can mean so many different things, more than just the single subjects we can study at school. So it's a really exciting field to go into. And next up, we've got one for Ellie. So we hear the term green careers a lot, but Ellie, to you, what does this really mean?
Okay, so a green career is quite a broad term. So a green career is actually any job that directly supports or indirectly supports the UK's movement to net zero and other environmental goals. So nature restoration projects or anything like that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a STEM subject. So there will be sort of those things that you think about. So building new technologies to support our reduction of greenhouse gases. However, it can also be a simple job as working for a company and helping them in their day-to-day life, but also moving them towards a sustainable way of working. Green careers really need what we would call green skills, and these can be anything. So they can be technical knowledge, but they can also be transferable stuff. So creativity is a green skill. We need someone to create the technology. We need someone to create the ideas that we need to get to net zero. So it can be quite broad.
Yeah, like Ariana just mentioned, it's really important to work across different subjects. That's a really good example of why. And one more for Helen. What's something you wish you'd known about careers in science? Thinking back to when you were at school, is there anything you wish you could go back and tell yourself?
I think when I was at school, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. And I think it's quite harsh in the UK that we make people decide what they want to do when they're 16 years old. It sounds even worse in Italy to me, but I think that's a really young age to really pin down. And so I was very nervous about the fact that I was, as I said, I chose my A levels as biology, chemistry, and English literature, and a lot of my teachers were very nervous about that as well. And I wish I could go back and tell my younger self that actually that diversity of subjects was going to be really helpful for me. I do a lot of writing in my current role. I did a lot of writing when I worked in public relations. The ability to communicate and understand texts is actually really, really important, and English literature has served me exceptionally well in that respect. Yes, I have struggled with the lack of maths from time to time, but science is all about collaboration. And so I've always been able to collaborate with people who have far more knowledge of statistics and bioinformatics and things like that than I do, and their brain is wired that way. And science requires diversity, and a diversity of people whose brains are all wired in different ways. My brain is not wired for maths, but I am still a successful scientist. And so I think that would be a nice thing to be able to tell my scared 16-year-old self.
I think that's a really important thing to say. And I think that is all we have time for. So thank you very much to everybody who's joined this session. It's been great to have you. We hope you enjoyed everybody's career stories. And if you've got any further questions, hopefully you can follow up another time. And stay tuned for what's happening the rest of the day. I think there's a few more sessions with panelists on protecting with maths and technology. So we hope you enjoy those as well. And I think we've all got some links to share in the chat. So hopefully you can follow up and take a look at what everybody's doing then. Thank you very much.